For 5 years, Baek Siwoo gave his wife a monthly allowance like she was his employee. For 5 years, he introduced her at dinner parties as someone resting between opportunities. For 5 years, he explained to friends why his foreign wife couldn't find meaningful work in Seoul. What Siwoo didn't know was that during those same 5 years, Tinashe Moyo had built Umoja Noir into the most exclusive art consultancy in the world, generating more revenue than his entire architecture firm. The morning he handed her divorce papers for being stagnant was the same morning she'd just negotiated $500,000 in deals. Sometimes the most powerful people are hiding in plain sight, waiting for the world to finally see them. The divorce papers landed on the mahogany coffee table like a death sentence wrapped in legal language. Tinashe Moyo stared at the crisp white documents, her name spelled correctly for once in 5 years, then slowly lifted her eyes to meet her husband's cold gaze. "You want a divorce because I don't have ambition," she said, her voice steady as mountain stone. Baek Siwoo adjusted his already perfect tie, a nervous habit he'd developed whenever he had to deliver bad news to clients. "That's not exactly how I would phrase it, Tina." "How would you phrase it then?" "I need a partner who contributes meaningfully to our life together. Someone with purpose, drive, actual measurable goals." His words came out rehearsed, like he'd practiced this speech in front of his bathroom mirror. "You've been completely stagnant for years now." Tinashe nodded slowly, processing his words while her laptop bag sat innocently 3 feet away. Inside that bag were contracts worth $200,000 that she'd negotiated that very morning with a tech billionaire in Lagos, a museum director in Manhattan, and a private collector in Dubai who owned more art than some small countries. But Siwoo had never once asked what she did during those long hours hunched over her computer screen. "Okay," she said simply. Siwoo blinked hard, clearly thrown off his script. He'd prepared himself for tears, for desperate begging, for the kind of dramatic emotional breakdown his mother had warned him Korean women were famous for. "Just okay? I'll sign the papers tomorrow morning." Tinashe stood gracefully, smoothing down her simple black dress that he'd called too plain for dinner parties. "Will you be staying here tonight, or should I expect the apartment to myself?" "I thought we should discuss this situation more thoroughly first. What exactly is left to discuss? You've clearly made your decision after careful consideration." She picked up her laptop bag with the casual ease of someone grabbing car keys. "I'll sleep in the guest room tonight." As she walked toward the hallway with measured steps, Siwoo called after her with obvious desperation. "Tina, wait just a minute." She paused at the threshold but didn't bother turning around. "It's Tinashe, actually. My name is Tinashe. I obviously know your name." "Do you really?" She finally glanced back at him over her shoulder. "After 5 full years of marriage, do you honestly know anything about me?" That night, while Siwoo tossed and turned restlessly in their expensive king-sized bed, Tinashe sat cross-legged in the guest room responding to urgent emails from 3 different time zones. A prominent collector in London desperately wanted her expert opinion on an emerging sculptor from Ghana whose work was causing a sensation in African art circles. A gallery owner in Tokyo was practically begging for her consultation on an upcoming exhibition of contemporary African artists. The CEO of a major tech company in San Francisco had just enthusiastically approved her detailed proposal for curating an impressive collection for his company's gleaming new headquarters. She typed each response carefully under her professional business name, Kesi Okonkwo, the mysterious founder and driving force behind Umoja Noir. For exactly 4 years, she'd systematically built the most exclusive and respected African art consultancy operating anywhere in the world, working entirely online while maintaining complete anonymity. Her carefully selected clients paid premium rates for her extensive expertise, her invaluable international connections, and most importantly, her absolute discretion in all business matters. Her phone buzzed softly with an encrypted message from Maya, her trusted assistant operating from their London headquarters. The major Vogue article about anonymous art world power players is definitely running next week. Multiple journalists are still trying desperately to identify Umoja Noir's mysterious founder. The speculation is reaching fever pitch. Tinashe smiled quietly in the darkness of the guest room. Let them try their hardest to solve the mystery. 3 months earlier, at yet another one of Siwoo's tedious networking dinner parties, she'd watched him perform his usual humiliating routine with practiced precision. "Everyone, please allow me to introduce my lovely wife," he'd announced to the table full of successful architects and their perfectly groomed spouses. "She's currently resting between career opportunities right now." The women at the table had immediately given her those pitying smiles that said they understood her embarrassing situation completely. The men had barely bothered looking up from their intense conversation about new building regulations and city planning policies. Tinashe had long ago perfected her response to these moments, offering a gracious nod and a carefully modulated, "Still carefully exploring all my available options." "Tina is incredibly creative, though," Siwoo had continued while cutting into his ridiculously expensive imported steak. "Always reading those thick art books, spending hours browsing galleries online. It's become like a serious hobby for her." If only he had the slightest idea that her supposed hobby had generated more actual revenue in the previous quarter than his prestigious architecture firm earned in 6 months. Mrs. Park, the perpetually gossiping wife of Siwoo's primary business partner, had leaned over with conspiratorial intimacy. "Don't worry yourself too much, dear. Finding your proper place in Seoul society takes considerable time for foreigners. The language barrier alone must be absolutely overwhelming. My Korean has actually become quite fluent now," Tinashe had replied with perfect politeness. "Oh, how absolutely wonderful for you, dear. Can you manage to order coffee for yourself at cafes?" Tinashe regularly negotiated million-dollar art deals in flawless Korean with Seoul's wealthiest collectors, but she'd simply smiled graciously and nodded her head like an obedient child. Later that same evening, Siwoo had conducted his usual post-dinner performance review in their bedroom. "You were unusually quiet again tonight. These dinner gatherings are extremely important for advancing my career trajectory. You really should make more effort to engage meaningfully with the other guests. What specific topics should I discuss with them?" "I don't know exactly. Normal wife things, I suppose. Cooking techniques, shopping experiences, whatever you actually do during your days at home." What she did during her days was run a business that Art World's insiders whispered about in the same reverential tones they reserved for Sotheby's and Christie's auction houses. But Siwoo had never once asked for specific details about how she spent her computer time. Hey there, amazing viewers. Before we dive deeper into Tinashe's absolutely incredible secret life, make sure you smash that like button if you're already completely hooked by this unbelievable story. Trust me when I say you absolutely won't believe the mind-blowing plot twists that are coming next. This story gets absolutely insane. The morning after receiving the divorce papers, Tinashe woke to 17 missed calls from Maya, each voicemail message sounding progressively more excited and urgent. The Vogue piece dropped early online. Maya's voice practically vibrated with barely contained excitement when Tinashe finally called back. "They didn't manage to identify you specifically, but the speculation across social media is absolutely everywhere. CNN wants to schedule a major feature segment. The New York Times arts section is calling constantly. Every major publication wants to discover who's really behind Umoja Noir." Tinashe walked slowly to their spacious kitchen, where Siwoo sat reading morning news on his expensive tablet while drinking coffee from the elaborate Italian machine his controlling mother had purchased for them without asking their preferences. "That's actually perfect timing," she told Maya quietly while Siwoo remained completely absorbed in his screen. "Should I start officially fielding interview requests from journalists? Not quite yet, but definitely prepare a comprehensive press packet with all our major achievements. I have a strong feeling it's finally time to step into the spotlight." Siwoo glanced up briefly from his tablet. "Another one of your mystery work calls? Something along those lines." He immediately returned his attention to his precious tablet without showing the slightest curiosity about her conversation. This was the same man who claimed he desperately wanted a wife with genuine purpose and professional ambition. Tinashe calmly poured herself coffee and opened her laptop at the marble kitchen island. By the time her first important client call began at exactly 9 a.m., Siwoo had already left for his office without saying goodbye. "Kisses, absolutely, darling, you've completely outdone yourself this time," gushed Patricia Hartwell, whose private art collection was worth considerably more than some small country's entire gross domestic products. "The pieces you personally selected for my London townhouse are absolutely divine beyond words. My guests at last night's dinner party literally could not stop talking about them for hours." I'm incredibly pleased that you're so happy with the final selection, Patricia. Now listen carefully. I desperately need your magical touch for my New York penthouse renovation. Same generous budget as our previous project, but I specifically want pieces that will make my insufferable ex-husband absolutely weep with pure envy when he sees them. Tanashi laughed genuinely. I believe I can definitely arrange something perfectly suitable for that particular goal. The detailed conversation lasted exactly 45 minutes and resulted in a 6-figure contract that would keep her London team busy for months. As she hung up the phone, Tanashi realized she felt more genuinely energized after one professional client conversation than she had during 5 entire years of Seoul dinner parties filled with meaningless small talk. Her phone immediately rang again, Maya calling back with urgent updates. You absolutely need to see this morning's international news coverage. Someone leaked several photographs. What kind of photographs exactly? From that private viewing event in London last year. You're clearly visible in 3 different shots. The entire art world is going completely mad trying to figure out your real identity. Tanashi's heart skipped several beats. She'd been extraordinarily careful about public appearances for years, but that London event had been supposedly completely private, restricted to serious collectors, and established artists only. Exactly how bad is the exposure? Well, the genuinely good news is that you look absolutely stunning and completely mysterious in every photo. The potentially problematic news is that every art journalist working across 3 continents is now actively playing detective, trying to solve the puzzle. After Maya hung up, Tanasha sat staring at her laptop screen for long minutes. 4 years of carefully maintained anonymity, and everything was unraveling at precisely the same moment her marriage was collapsing. The timing felt like the universe was sending her an unmistakably clear message about destiny. Her phone buzzed with a text message from Siwoo. Completely forgot to mention earlier, mandatory dinner with my parents tonight. 7 p.m. sharp. Please wear something appropriately nice for once. She stared at the dismissive message for a long moment, then calmly deleted it without bothering to respond. Instead, she immediately called James, her trusted lawyer in London. James, it's Kezi calling. I need you to prepare some important legal documents for me. Certainly. What specific type of legal matter requires attention? Divorce proceedings with international asset disclosure requirements. James paused thoughtfully before responding. Should I assume this relates to your current Korean residence situation? Exactly correct. And James, when they officially request information about my financial assets, I want you to tell them absolutely everything. When you say everything, do you mean everything? Every single account, every active contract, every cent of revenue that Umoja Noir has generated over 4 years. She smiled grimly while staring out their floor-to-soiling windows at Seoul's impressive skyline. I think my husband is about to receive the reality check of his entire lifetime. That afternoon, while Siwoo confidently presented architectural designs to impressed clients across Seoul, Tanasha received an email that would change absolutely everything moving forward. Dear Ms. Okonkwo, it began, using her carefully protected business pseudonym. I'm writing on behalf of Seoul Arts Quarterly magazine. We've been closely following Umoja Noir's absolutely extraordinary work in the international art world, and we would be deeply honored to feature your revolutionary consultancy in our upcoming prestigious issue. We completely understand and respect that you maintain strict privacy, but would you possibly consider granting us an exclusive interview if we conducted it here in Seoul? We genuinely believe Korean collectors would be absolutely fascinated to learn about your groundbreaking work. Tanashi read the professionally written email exactly 3 times, absorbing every word. Seoul Arts Quarterly was widely recognized as the most prestigious and influential art publication operating anywhere in Korea. Siwoo read every single issue religiously. His status-conscious mother maintained an expensive subscription. Everyone in their suffocating social circle would definitely see whatever they published. She carefully considered her options while thinking about Siwoo's crushing words from the previous evening. Someone with purpose, drive, actual measurable goals. She typed her response with steady fingers. I would be absolutely delighted to discuss Umoja Noir's strategic expansion into the Asian market with your publication. Let's definitely schedule something for next week. As she clicked send, her phone immediately rang with an incoming call. Siwoo's mother calling directly. "Tinashe, dear child, Siwoo mentioned that you might be experiencing some difficult personal challenges right now." Mrs. Baek had never once called her directly in 5 years of marriage. Every previous communication had gone through Siwoo, always maintaining formal distance, always carrying the subtle message that Tinashe wasn't quite sophisticated enough for her accomplished son. "I'm managing everything perfectly fine, Mrs. Baek. Thank you for your concern. I specifically wanted to invite you for lunch tomorrow, just us women talking honestly. Perhaps we can discuss practical ways to work through whatever troubles you're currently experiencing." The underlying subtext was crystal clear. Convince the foreign wife to fight harder for the marriage. That's very thoughtful, but I really don't think that approach is necessary. Tinashe, successful marriage requires genuine effort from both parties involved. Sometimes a woman needs to compromise her purely personal desires for the greater good of the relationship and family harmony. Compromise which specific personal desires? A telling pause filled the phone line. "Well, Siwoo mentioned that you've been expressing interest in finding employment, but surely you understand that his career advancement must take absolute priority. He's reached such a critically important professional stage." Tinashe stared at her laptop screen, where 6 different high-stakes business conversations were happening simultaneously across multiple international time zones. Yesterday's revenue alone had significantly exceeded Siwoo's monthly salary from his prestigious firm. "I understand the situation perfectly, Mrs. Baek. Wonderful news. So shall we plan lunch for tomorrow afternoon?" "I'm afraid I have several critically important business meetings already scheduled." Another pause, noticeably longer this time. "Business meetings, you said?" "Yes, extremely important ones that cannot be rescheduled." After hanging up, Tinashe realized she felt something she hadn't experienced in years. Pure, undiluted power. Not the careful, hidden power she'd wielded through Umoja Noir's anonymous operations, but open, visible power that she could wield directly. The intoxicating power to simply say no to unreasonable demands. That evening, Siwoo returned home from work to find their apartment filled with the rich, complex aromas of all his favorite Korean dishes. Tinashe had spent the entire afternoon cooking with meticulous care, but definitely not for the reason he would naturally assume. "This smells absolutely incredible," he said, while loosening his silk tie with obvious satisfaction. "Are we celebrating some special occasion?" "In a way, yes." Tinashe served him a perfectly arranged plate with elegant precision. "I wanted to cook your favorite meal one final time." "Final time for what? I'm flying to London tomorrow morning." Siwoo's expensive fork paused halfway to his mouth. "For how long exactly? Indefinitely?" "Tina, we should definitely discuss this situation more rationally and calmly. Yes, I've requested a divorce, but we don't need to rush into anything unnecessarily dramatic or extreme." She sat gracefully across from him with her own carefully prepared plate. "What would you like to discuss rationally?" "Our practical timeline for separation. The necessary arrangements for dividing assets. Division of our accumulated possessions." He took a bite, then paused with sudden concern. "What assets would you even have? Do you somehow have personal savings that I don't know about?" Tinashe smiled with quiet confidence. It definitely wasn't a happy smile. "Siwoo, in 5 full years of marriage, have you ever once asked me what I actually do on my computer? You read art blogs obsessively, online shopping, social media scrolling. Have you ever asked to see what projects I'm working on? Working on projects?" He laughed dismissively. "Tina, you don't actually work at anything meaningful. That's been our entire ongoing conversation." The escalation built slowly and steadily, like dangerous steam building pressure in a sealed container. Tinashe felt years of carefully maintained silence beginning to crack along invisible fault lines. "What if I told you that's completely incorrect?" "What do you mean by incorrect?" "What if I told you I've been working productively every single day for the past 4 years?" Siwoo's expression shifted gradually from mild confusion to something considerably sharper and more focused. Working at what exactly? Building something substantial. Something genuinely significant. Like what, a personal blog? Some kind of online store? The automatic dismissal in his voice was reflexive, completely unconscious. Tinashe realized that even now, even when faced with direct contradiction of his assumptions, he remained completely incapable of imagining her doing anything truly meaningful or valuable. "Something along those lines," she said with quiet dignity. Well, whatever it is, we'll obviously need to account for it properly in the divorce proceedings. Though I honestly can't imagine it amounts to anything substantial. Tinashe finished her dinner in complete silence, carefully watching her husband eat food she'd prepared with love, while simultaneously planning exactly how to tell him that his supposedly stagnant wife had been quietly building a business empire that operated successfully across 3 continents. Tomorrow, she would board a plane to London and reclaim her real life. Next week, Seoul Arts Quarterly would publish her exclusive interview and reveal her identity to Korea's art world. And sometime very soon, Baek Si-woo would discover that the woman he'd systematically dismissed for 5 years was someone the entire international art community considered an absolute legend. But tonight, she simply watched him eat in blissful ignorance, carefully storing up this precious moment. The very last time he would ever look at her and see someone small and insignificant. 3 days later, Si-woo sat in his corner office at Young & Associates Architecture, reviewing blueprints for a luxury hotel project when his assistant knocked and entered carrying coffee and the morning mail. "Your 10 o'clock appointment called to reschedule," she announced, while placing a neat stack of magazines on his polished desk, alongside his usual architectural journals. And these publications came from the lobby reception area. Si-woo barely glanced at the colorful publications until one particular cover caught his attention like a lightning bolt. International Art Review featured a striking black and white photograph of an elaborate art installation, but the bold headline made his coffee cup freeze halfway to his lips. "The Mystery Mogul, Inside Umoja Noir's $500,000 empire." He flipped the magazine open with trembling fingers while his morning coffee grew cold and bitter. The opening article began with a description that made his stomach twist into painful knots. For exactly 4 years, an anonymous consultant operating under the carefully chosen name Kissy Okonkwo has completely revolutionized how the world's wealthiest collectors acquire authentic African art. Umoja Noir, her mysteriously secretive consultancy, has successfully facilitated deals worth millions of dollars, provided expert advice to prestigious museums across 3 different continents, and created spectacular private collections that easily rival those of major international institutions. Yet absolutely no one knows who she really is or where she operates from. Si-woo's expensive coffee grew completely cold as he read deeper into the detailed article with growing horror. Industry sources consistently describe Okonkwo as brilliant, patient, and absolutely uncompromising in her professional standards. "She never accepts work that doesn't perfectly align with her core values," explains one prominent collector who absolutely insisted on maintaining anonymity. "She could easily make millions representing certain controversial dealers, but she absolutely refuses. Her integrity remains completely absolute in every situation." The comprehensive article continued with devastating precision. Okonkwo's revolutionary business philosophy centers entirely on what she calls quiet power. In a rare recorded interview, she explained her approach. "The most profound and lasting changes happen when people aren't watching or paying attention. When you're systematically dismissed or completely overlooked, you gain the precious freedom to build something truly extraordinary." Si-woo's hands began shaking uncontrollably. That exact phrase, quiet power. Tinashe had said those precise words during a heated argument 2 years ago when he'd accused her of being passive and unengaging at social events. Umoja Noir's estimated annual revenue exceeds $500,000, with an exclusive client list including prominent tech executives, influential museum directors, and A-list celebrities who prize absolute discretion above everything else. $500,000. Si-woo stared at that impossible number until his vision became completely blurred. His own salary, after 10 grueling years at Seoul's most prestigious architectural firm, was less than half that staggering amount. His phone buzzed urgently with a text from his colleague, Park. "Did you see that international art magazine? This mysterious Umoja Noir person sounds exactly like someone I'd hire immediately. Too bad they're completely anonymous." Si-woo's memory began spiraling backward through countless moments he'd carelessly dismissed. Tinashe's dedicated hours hunched over her laptop. Her mysterious phone calls conducted in rapid English that stopped abruptly whenever he entered rooms. Her uncanny knowledge about complex art market trends that he'd always attributed to casual hobbyist reading. The magazine profile included a partial photograph from an exclusive London gallery event showing an elegant black woman photographed from behind whilst speaking confidently to a captivated group of well-dressed collectors. The caption reads simply, "Okonkwo at a private viewing, one of her extremely rare public appearances." Siwoo studied the image with growing recognition. The woman's confident posture, the graceful way she held her head, even the elegant dress looked unnervingly familiar. His assistant's voice made him jump violently. "Mr. Baek, your 10:30 appointment has arrived and is waiting." "Cancel it immediately," he said, without looking up from the magazine. "Cancel absolutely everything scheduled for today." His assistant hesitated in obvious confusion. "Sir, you have the important Morrison project presentation this afternoon." I said, "Cancel everything." That evening, Siwoo returned home to an apartment that felt eerily empty and lifeless. Tinashe's matching suitcases had completely vanished. Her laptop bag, usually stationed strategically by the kitchen island, had disappeared without a trace. Even her extensive collection of art books had been removed from their shared shelves, leaving obvious gaps like missing teeth. He called her phone with desperate urgency. The call went directly to voicemail without ringing. He immediately tried again, same frustrating result. On his third increasingly frantic attempt, she finally answered. "Where are you right now?" he demanded without preamble. "London." Her voice sounded completely different somehow. Clearer, stronger, more confident. "London? We have extremely important things to discuss immediately." "Such as what?" "The divorce papers, for starters. You signed them but provided no forwarding address for your legal representation." "My lawyer has all the necessary contact information." Siwoo paced frantically around their empty living room like a caged animal. "Tina, this entire situation is completely ridiculous. You can't just disappear from my life without explanation." "I'm not disappearing anywhere. I'm simply going home." "Seoul is your home now." A long, meaningful pause filled the international phone connection. "No, Siwoo. Seoul was merely where I lived while I was married to you. There's a significant difference between those two things." Something dangerous in her calm tone made his chest tighten with unexpected panic. This wasn't the perpetually soft-spoken woman who used to apologize constantly for having independent opinions. "We need to discuss proper asset division," he said desperately. "My lawyer will handle all those details. What assets could you possibly have? You don't own any meaningful assets." Another pause, considerably longer this time. When she spoke again, her voice carried a note of something that might have been genuine amusement. "Don't I?" The international line went completely dead. Siwoo stared at his silent phone, frantically replaying her mysterious tone in his mind. Then he suddenly remembered the devastating magazine article still sitting open on his office desk. He drove back to his office at 11 p.m., his racing mind connecting impossible dots. The surprised security guard recognized him, but looked confused about his late return. In his office, the International Art Review lay exactly where he'd abandoned it, still open to the Umoja Noir feature article. He read the entire comprehensive article again, this time taking detailed notes on every revealing detail. The business had launched exactly 4 years ago. The anonymous founder described as patient, disciplined, and deeply private. The estimated revenue figures that made his successful architecture career look modest and insignificant. His office phone rang loudly in the midnight silence, his mother calling. "Siwoo, have you seen tonight's evening news broadcast?" "What news exactly?" Channel 5 did an extensive story about some mysterious art dealer operating internationally. They featured the same magazine article you probably saw today. The entire Korean art world is buzzing with speculation about this Umoja Noir person. Siwoo's blood turned to ice water. "Why are you calling me about random art news?" "Because they specifically mentioned Seoul in the report. This consultant is apparently expanding into Asian markets next quarter, opening a permanent office here in our city." Her voice carried obvious excitement and social ambition. "Can you imagine if we could somehow get her to advise us on art selection for the new hotel project? The prestige alone would be absolutely incredible." "Mother, I have to hang up now. Wait, one more interesting thing." The strangest part of the entire story was a photograph from London. The woman looked almost exactly like Tinashe from behind. Isn't that the most peculiar coincidence? Siwoo hung up immediately and called his lawyer with shaking hands. "James, it's Baek Siwoo calling. I need you to expedite comprehensive research on my wife's financial assets immediately. Mr. Bake, it's nearly midnight. I don't care what time it is. I need complete information about her income sources, all bank accounts, any business registrations, everything you can find. Sir, is there some specific concern driving this urgency? Just do it tonight. While waiting anxiously for his lawyer to return his call, Siwoo opened his laptop and searched obsessively for Umoja Noir online. What he discovered made his comfortable world tilt sideways off its axis. Professional websites designed in multiple languages. Glowing client testimonials that read like passionate love letters to an art genius. Detailed industry articles dating back 4 full years, all praising the anonymous founder's revolutionary approach to African art curation and cultural preservation. One particular testimonial made him stop breathing entirely. Kizzy completely changed how I understand art appreciation, her infinite patience in educating me, her absolute refusal to let me make purchases based on fleeting trends rather than genuine appreciation, her remarkable ability to find pieces that speak directly to the soul rather than the ego. She's not just a consultant, she's an artist in her own right. Patient, educational, principled. These were character traits he'd never once associated with his quiet wife. But they perfectly described someone he was beginning to recognize with growing horror. His phone buzzed with an urgent email from his lawyer's research assistant. Preliminary findings attached. Note, subject has extensive international banking activity. Full comprehensive report pending. The email attachment made Siwoo's hands tremble uncontrollably. Bank transfers from London. Contract payments from New York, Tokyo, Dubai. Individual amounts that ranged from $20,000 to $60,000 per single transaction, all dated within the past 4 years of their marriage, all credited to accounts belonging to Tinashe Moyo. At exactly 2 a.m., Siwoo's phone rang with an unfamiliar international number, Mr. Bake, and crisp British accent he didn't recognize. This is James Hartwell, representing Ms. Moyo in divorce proceedings. I understand you've requested immediate asset disclosure information. Yes, I need it immediately. Very well then. Ms. Moyo's primary business, Umoja Noir Art Consultancy, reported gross revenue of $487,000 last fiscal year. Her liquid assets currently total approximately $600,000, held in secure accounts across London, New York, and Zurich. The devastating numbers hit Siwoo like physical blows to his chest. Are you absolutely certain these figures are completely accurate? Quite certain, Mr. Beck. Ms. Moyo's business has been operating successfully for 4 years. She's widely considered one of the most respected art consultants in the international market. That's completely impossible. My wife doesn't work at anything. A professional pause, Mr. Bake, are you familiar with Umoja Noir? I read about it today for the first time. Moyo is Umoja Noir. She founded it, built it, and has been running it successfully throughout your entire marriage. Siwoo dropped his phone. Want to know what happens when Siwoo's entire world comes crashing down? The next part will blow your mind. Don't forget to hit that notification bell so you never miss these incredible stories that'll keep you on the edge of your seat. The next morning brought fresh waves of devastating horror. His mother called before 7 a.m., her voice tight with barely controlled panic. Siwoo, you absolutely must see the Seoul Herald immediately. Front page of the lifestyle section. He found the newspaper online with trembling fingers. The headline read, International Art World Mystery Leads to Seoul. Below it, a much clearer photograph from the London Gallery event showed Tinashe in unmistakable profile, speaking with obvious authority to a group of collectors who were listening with visible reverence and complete attention. The detailed article identified her as the rumored founder of Umoja Noir, the secretive consultancy that has completely revolutionized African art acquisition for high-net-worth individuals worldwide. His phone exploded with constant messages. Colleagues asking if he'd somehow known about her secret business. Business associates desperately wondering if he could make valuable introductions. His mother's gossipy friends calling to ask if the newspaper had made some kind of terrible error. Park sent a text that made Siwoo's stomach churn violently. Dude, your wife is literally like the Steve Jobs of art dealing. How did you not know about this? How did he not know? Because he'd never bothered asking meaningful questions. Because when she'd tried explaining her genuine interests, he'd dismissed them as pointless hobbies. Because when she'd mentioned wanting professional work, he'd patiently explained why she wasn't qualified for anything important. Another text from Park arrived. Seoul's Arts Quarterly wants to interview her exclusively. They're offering their biggest feature spread ever. This is absolutely huge for Seoul's international reputation. Siwoo realized with growing horror that his supposedly stagnant wife was about to become one of the most celebrated business people in Seoul. The woman he'd divorced for lacking ambition was about to grace magazine covers while he remained a mid-level architect with a nice corner office. His assistant called urgently, "Mr. Baek, there are reporters asking specific questions about your wife. Should I refer them to someone particular? Tell them absolutely no comment." Also, Seoul Arts Quarterly called directly. They want to know if you'd like to provide a quote about Ms. Moyo's success for their upcoming profile feature. The irony was so sharp it physically hurt. They wanted him to comment publicly on the success of a woman he'd never recognized as successful. No quote, he managed. That afternoon, alone in his office while avoiding all appointments, Siwoo did something he'd never done before. He researched his own wife. What he discovered systematically destroyed every assumption he'd built their marriage on. Umoja Noir's professional website featured client testimonials that painted a detailed picture of someone Siwoo didn't recognize. Kisi taught me that collecting art isn't about social status. It's about genuine connection, understanding history, and accepting responsibility to the artists and cultures you're representing. Her knowledge is completely encyclopedic, but what sets her apart is her unwavering integrity. She once turned down a 6-figure commission because the client wanted pieces for the wrong reasons. Working with Umoja Noir fundamentally changed how I see myself as a collector. Kisi doesn't just sell art, she educates about heritage, actively supports living artists, and ensures that African voices are centered in every transaction. Siwoo scrolled through years of industry articles praising the anonymous consultant's groundbreaking work. One comprehensive piece from Art News described Umoja Noir as setting the absolute gold standard for ethical art consultation. Another detailed article from the art newspaper quoted gallery owners, calling Kesi Okonkwo the most principled dealer we've ever worked with. He found a recorded interview from a prominent art podcast. When he clicked play, Tinashe's voice filled his office, but she sounded like someone he'd never met before. The art world has a problematic history of extracting African culture without properly compensating African artists or communities, she said with quiet authority that commanded respect. Umoja Noir exists specifically to change that harmful dynamic. We ensure that every purchase supports living artists, preserves cultural knowledge, and builds bridges rather than walls. The interviewer asked about her business philosophy. "I believe completely in quiet power," Tinashe replied. "The most meaningful changes happen when you stop waiting for permission and start building the world you want to see. You don't need anyone's approval to do meaningful work." Siwoo had to pause the recording. Those words, spoken with such confidence, came from the woman he'd told was being unrealistic about her career ambitions. The interview continued. "Success isn't about being the loudest voice in the room. It's about being the most trustworthy, the most prepared, the most committed to your values. My clients trust me because I never compromise those values, not for any amount of money." He thought about all those dinner parties where he'd introduced her as someone resting between opportunities. She'd been building a business that operated across 3 continents, while he'd been explaining to people why she didn't work. His phone rang with another unfamiliar number. "Mr. Baek? This is Professor Kim from Seoul National University. I'm organizing a symposium on international business success stories. We'd be honored to invite Ms. Moyo to speak about building global enterprises from Seoul. She doesn't live in Seoul anymore." "Oh, I understood she was opening a Seoul office for Umoja Noir?" Siwoo's vision blurred completely. "A Seoul office?" "Yes, the announcement was in this morning's International Business Journal. Umoja Noir is expanding into Asian markets with headquarters here in Seoul. It's wonderful news for our city's international business community." After hanging up, Siwoo found the article Professor Kim mentioned. The announcement was brief but devastating. Following successful operations across North America, Europe, and Africa, Umoja Noir will establish its Asian headquarters in Seoul, South Korea. Founder Kesi Okonkwo cited Seoul's strategic location and sophisticated art market as key factors in the decision. She was coming back. not as his wife, but as an international business leader choosing Seoul as her Asian base of operations. His phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "Hi, Siwoo, this is Maya, Miss Moyo's assistant. She asked me to inform you that Seoul Arts Quarterly will be interviewing her next week. She wanted you to know in case reporters contact you for comment." Even through her assistant, Tanashi was being more considerate than he deserved. He tried calling her again with desperate urgency. This time she answered on the first ring. "Hello, Siwoo. I need to see you immediately. I'm in London. Then I'll fly to London tonight." A pause. "Why?" "Because I need to understand what happened. I need to understand who you really are. I'm the same person I've always been." "No, you're not. You're Kessie Okonkwo. You're Umoja Noir, yes." The simple admission hit him harder than any accusation could have. "Why didn't you tell me? When should I have told you? When you were explaining why I couldn't find meaningful work in Seoul. When you were introducing me as someone resting between opportunities. When you were giving me an allowance like I was your employee." Each question was a precisely aimed arrow. "I thought I knew you," he whispered. "You knew the version of me that fit your story. The quiet wife who needed taking care of. The woman who had no ambitions worth considering." Her voice remained steady. "But Siwoo, that was never me. That was just who I became when I was with you." The line went quiet except for the sound of his own labored breathing. "Tanash, I made a terrible mistake. Yes, you did. But not the mistake you think." "What do you mean?" "Your mistake wasn't divorcing me because you thought I lacked ambition. Your mistake was never once, in 5 years, asking me what I was passionate about. Your mistake was deciding who I was without ever wondering who I might be." The truth of it made him physically dizzy. "I want to fix this somehow. There's nothing to fix, Siwoo. There's only what happens next. What happens next? You live your life. I live mine. And maybe eventually we could both be grateful that we freed each other to become who we actually are." She hung up, and Saishu sat in his office until security came to lock the building, staring at articles about a woman he'd lived with for 5 years without ever really seeing. Tomorrow, Seoul would wake up to the news that one of its accomplished international business people had been hiding in plain sight, dismissed and overlooked by the very people who should have celebrated her. And Siwoo would have to live with the knowledge that he'd thrown away something extraordinary because he'd been too blind to recognize it. 1 week later, Seoul Arts Quarterly's photography studio buzzed with controlled chaos as their most anticipated interview of the year was about to begin. Tanashi sat calmly in the makeup chair while stylists fussed around her, but she felt more centered and powerful than she had in years. "Ms. Moyo, we're absolutely thrilled that you agreed to this exclusive interview," gushed the magazine's editor-in-chief, practically vibrating with excitement. "When we discovered that the mysterious founder of Umoja Noir has been living in Seoul this entire time, we knew this would be the story of the decade. I'm pleased to finally step into the light," Tanashi replied gracefully. "Umoja Noir has grown beyond what I initially imagined possible, and Seoul feels like the perfect location for our Asian expansion." The photographer positioned elaborate lighting while assistants arranged stunning African art pieces as backdrop elements. Each piece had been personally selected by Tinashe from her private collection, works that told stories of resilience, creativity, and cultural pride. "Can you tell us about the decision to reveal your identity now?" asked the lead journalist, settling into her chair with recording equipment. "Sometimes hiding becomes more exhausting than revealing," Tanashi answered thoughtfully. "I built Umoja Noir in anonymity because I wanted the work to speak for itself, not my personal story. But now the work is strong enough to support transparency. Your business has facilitated millions in art sales while maintaining the highest ethical standards. What drives that commitment? African art has been extracted and exploited for centuries. Umoja Noir exists to change that narrative completely. Every transaction supports living artists, preserves cultural knowledge, and ensures that African voices control how their heritage is shared with the world." The journalist leaned forward with obvious fascination. "You've been operating this incredibly successful business from Seoul. How did the local art community not know about your work?" Tanashi smiled with quiet irony. "Sometimes the most obvious things are the hardest to see. I attended gallery openings, networked with collectors, and participated in the art scene. But when people have predetermined ideas about who you are, they often can't see who you actually are." Meanwhile, across Seoul in his corner office, Siwoo refreshed the Seoul Arts Quarterly website obsessively, waiting for the interview to go live. His hands shook as he typed his wife's name into search engines, discovering article after article about her upcoming feature. His assistant knocked hesitantly. "Mr. Baek, your mother called. She says it's urgent. Tell her I'm unavailable." "Sir, she mentioned something about reporters calling their house?" Siwoo's stomach dropped. "What reporters?" "Something about international art news." She sounded quite distressed. Before he could respond, his phone rang with his mother's panicked voice. "Siwoo, you need to come home immediately. There are journalists outside our house asking about Tinashe. The neighbors are staring. Mrs. Park called to ask if we knew our daughter-in-law was some kind of international business celebrity." "Mother, calm down." "Calm down? The woman you divorced is about to be on the cover of Seoul Arts Quarterly as some mysterious art world genius. Do you understand what people will think? That we drove away someone extraordinary? That our family doesn't recognize talent when it lives in our own house?" The irony was devastating. His mother, who had spent 5 years treating Tinashe like decorative furniture, was now terrified about their family's reputation. "How could you not know?" she continued frantically. "She lived with us for 5 years. She attended our dinners, our family gatherings. How did none of us realize?" "Because we never asked," Siwoo admitted quietly. "What? We never asked her about herself. We decided who she was and never questioned our assumptions." A long silence filled the phone line. "The Young family is already calling to ask if we can arrange introductions," his mother said weakly. "Everyone wants to meet the famous art consultant who was hiding in plain sight." After hanging up, Siwoo sat alone with the weight of collective family blindness. They'd had access to one of the most respected art consultants in the world, and they'd treated her like an unemployed housewife who needed their charity. That evening, Seoul Arts Quarterly released the digital version of their feature story. The headline read, "The Hidden Empress: How Umoja Noir's founder built an art empire from Seoul." Siwoo's phone exploded with notifications as everyone in their social circle discovered the truth simultaneously. Text messages poured in from colleagues, friends, and business associates. "Your wife is that Umoja Noir person? How did you keep it secret? Can you arrange an introduction? My company needs art consulting. This explains why she always seemed so knowledgeable at gallery events." But the message that destroyed him came from Park. "Bro, you divorced the most successful person any of us know. What were you thinking?" The magazine feature was comprehensive and devastating. Beautiful photographs showed Tinashe in her element, confident and radiant, while discussing pieces from her collection. The interview revealed her business philosophy, her commitment to ethical practices, and her vision for expanding into Asian markets. One quote hit Siwoo like a physical blow. "People often asked why I maintain such privacy about my work. The truth is, when you're consistently underestimated, you learn to let your actions speak louder than explanations. Some people only hear you after the world tells them you're worth listening to." The article detailed Umoja Noir's client list without naming names, but the descriptions made it clear that Tinashe worked with tech billionaires, museum directors, celebrities, and collectors whose names appeared regularly in international news. "Ms. Moyo's expansion into Seoul represents a homecoming of sorts," the journalist wrote. "She spent 5 years building relationships in Korea's art community while simultaneously operating one of the world's most respected consultancies. Her Seoul office will serve collectors across Asia who have been waiting years for access to Umoja Noir's services." Siwoo read the article 3 times, each reading revealing new layers of his blindness. The woman described in these pages was brilliant, principled, internationally respected. She was also someone he'd lived with for 5 years without ever really meeting. His phone rang. "Maya Tinashe's assistant, Mr. Baek, Miss. Moyo asked me to inform you that the Seoul office opening will be next month. She wanted you to know in case it affects any mutual social connections. Can I speak with her?" "She's in back-to-back interviews with international media today. CNN, BBC, Art Forum. Everyone wants to speak with her now that her identity is public." After hanging up, Siwoo realized the full magnitude of what he'd lost. Not just a wife, but access to someone whose professional success dwarfed his own achievements. 2 weeks later, invitations arrived across Seoul for the Umoja Noir Asia-Pacific office opening. The event was scheduled at Seoul's most prestigious gallery space, with an exclusive guest list that read like a who's who of Korean high society. Siwoo received an invitation, though he suspected Maya had sent it rather than Tinashe herself. The opening night was everything he'd expected and worse. Tinashe moved through the crowd like someone born to command attention, greeting guests in fluent Korean, English, and what sounded like several African languages. She wore a stunning dress that highlighted her natural elegance, and every person in the room seemed magnetized by her presence. Siwoo, there you are, his mother appeared at his elbow, wearing her most expensive hanbok and a strained smile. We must go congratulate Tinashe. People will notice if we don't. They approached Tinashe while she spoke with Seoul's mayor about potential cultural exchange programs. When she noticed them, her expression remained perfectly polite but distant. Mrs. Baek Siwoo, she acknowledged them graciously. Thank you for coming. Tinashe, dear, this event is absolutely magnificent, his mother gushed with obvious desperation. We had no idea you were planning something so impressive. I don't recall mentioning it during our conversations, Tinashe replied smoothly. We're so proud of everything you've accomplished, his mother continued, the lie obvious to everyone within hearing distance. That's very kind of you to say now. The gentle correction hit like a slap. Siwoo watched his mother's face redden with embarrassment. Tinashe, could we speak privately? Siwoo asked quietly. Of course. Maya, could you show Mr. and Mrs. Baek to the VIP area? I'll join you in a few minutes. 20 minutes later, Tinashe approached their table with the confident stride of someone completely in control of her environment. You wanted to speak, she asked, settling gracefully into her chair. I owe you an apology, Siwoo began. Actually, I owe you thousands of apologies. You don't owe me anything, Siwoo. Our marriage is over. We're both free to build the lives we want. But I need you to know that I understand now. I see what I was too blind to recognize before. Tinashe studied his face carefully. What do you see? I see someone who was always extraordinary, who I somehow convinced myself was ordinary. I see someone who was building an empire while I was giving her an allowance. I see someone who was patient enough to stay married to someone who never bothered to know her. And what do you want me to do with that recognition? The question caught him off guard. I want another chance to do what? To see you, to know you. To be married to who you actually are, instead of who I decided you were. Tinashe was quiet for a long moment, watching the crowd of people who had come to celebrate her success. Siwoo, do you know why I never told you about Umoja Noir? Because I would have dismissed it. No. Because you never asked what I was passionate about. In 5 years of marriage, you never once asked me what I dreamed about, what I wanted to build, what excited me about the future. Her voice remained calm but carried deep sadness. You decided I was someone who needed taking care of, and you never questioned whether that person actually existed. I was wrong about everything. Yes, you were. But the problem wasn't that you were wrong. The problem was that you were content being wrong. You never felt curious enough about your own wife to discover who she really was. Siwoo felt tears threatening. What can I do to fix this? There's nothing to fix, Siwoo. There's only what we choose to do next. What do you choose? I choose to build the life I've always wanted. I choose to work with people who see me clearly from the beginning. I choose to stop making myself smaller so other people feel comfortable. And us? There is no us anymore. There's you, and there's me, and there's the opportunity for both of us to become better people than we were when we were together. Before Siwoo could respond, Maya appeared at Tinashe's shoulder. Excuse me, Miss. Moyo, the Seoul Times photographer is ready for your interview. Of course. Tinashe stood gracefully, then looked back at Siwoo. I'm glad you came tonight. I hope seeing all of this helps you understand that people are often much more complex than we assume. Tinashe. Wait, yes, are you happy? She smiled, and for the first time all evening it reached her eyes. I'm getting there. As she walked away to join the photographer, Siwoo realized he was watching someone who had transformed completely the moment she stopped trying to fit into the small space he'd created for her. 6 months later, Siwoo received an unexpected text message. Hi, it's Tinashe. I'll be in Seoul next week for a gallery opening. Would you like to have coffee and talk? No pressure, just thought it might be good to clear the air completely. He stared at the message for a long time before responding. I'd like that very much. They met at a quiet cafe in Hongdae, neutral territory where neither of them had memories. Tinashe looked radiant and relaxed in a way he'd never seen during their marriage. You look happy, he said honestly. I am happy. Umoja Noir is expanding faster than I ever imagined. We're opening offices in Tokyo and Singapore. I'm finally doing exactly the work I was meant to do. I'm glad. How are you, Saiwoo? Learning. Trying to understand how I could live with someone for 5 years and never really see them. And what have you learned? That I was so focused on who I thought you should be that I never bothered discovering who you actually were. That I mistook quiet for passive, patience for weakness, grace for lack of ambition. Tanashi nodded thoughtfully. Those are important realizations. I've been wondering about something. What's that? If I had asked, if I had been curious about your work, would you have told me about Umoja Noir? Tinashe considered the question carefully. Honestly, I don't know. By the time the business was really successful, I'd learned not to share things that mattered to me because you had a way of making them feel small. I'm sorry. I know you are. And I've forgiven you, not for your sake, but for mine. Carrying anger would have kept me connected to who I was when I was trying to be small enough for our marriage. Do you think we could ever be friends? Maybe, eventually. Right now, I think we both need to keep growing into who we're meant to be. As they parted ways outside the cafe, Saiwoo realized this was closure. Not the dramatic confrontation he'd imagined, but something quieter and more profound. He was watching someone who had found herself, and he was beginning the long work of figuring out who he might be if he stopped, assuming he already knew everything. Tanashi walked away toward her car, her phone already ringing with another business call, her life full of purpose and possibility. She'd built something beautiful from the space she'd been given, and now she was free to build even more. And there you have it, amazing viewers. This incredible story of Tanashi's transformation from dismissed wife to international business mogul proves that sometimes the most powerful people are the ones working quietly in the background. Her journey reminds us that our worth isn't determined by who recognizes it, but by the work we do and the values we maintain. If this story inspired you as much as it inspired me, make sure to subscribe for more incredible tales of triumph, resilience, and the power of quiet determination. Hit that like button, share this with someone who needs to hear Tinashi's story, and remember that sometimes the most extraordinary people are hiding in plain sight, waiting for the world to catch up to who they've always been. Saiwoo spent the following months in therapy, learning to ask questions instead of making assumptions. He began volunteering at a community center, discovering that service taught him more about other people than networking dinners ever had. Sometimes he saw Tanashi's name in business journals or spotted her at gallery openings across the city. They would nod politely if their eyes met, but they belonged to different worlds now. She moved confidently through spaces she'd helped create, while he worked slowly toward becoming someone worth knowing. The divorce was finalized quietly, without drama. The asset division revealed the full scope of what Tinashe had built during their marriage. Her lawyer presented documentation showing that Umoja Noir had generated more revenue in its 4 years of operation than Saiwoo's architecture firm earned in a decade. But the numbers weren't what haunted him. What kept him awake was the memory of her quiet dignity during all those years when he'd treated her success as invisible, her ambitions as unrealistic, her patience as passivity. 1 year later, Saiwoo received an invitation to the opening of Umoja Noir's permanent Seoul gallery space. The invitation was formal, probably sent to everyone in Seoul's art community, but he went anyway. The gallery was magnificent, showcasing contemporary African artists alongside historical pieces that told stories of resilience and creativity. Tanashi had created a space that educated while it inspired, that honored tradition while embracing innovation. He watched from across the room as she spoke with visitors, explaining the significance of various works, connecting people to artists and stories they'd never encountered. This was who she'd always been, he realized. He'd just been too limited to see it. As the evening wound down, she approached him near a stunning sculpture that seemed to capture light and throw it back transformed. "I'm glad you came," she said simply. "Thank you for the invitation. Saiwoo, I want you to know something. Our marriage wasn't a waste. It taught me that I never want to make myself small again. It taught me that my worth isn't dependent on other people's recognition. Those were valuable lessons. And what did it teach me? Only you can answer that," he thought for a moment. "It taught me that love isn't about protecting someone from the world. It's about helping them shine more brightly in it." That's a good lesson. Too late to matter, but a good lesson. It's never too late for lessons that help you treat the next person better. They stood quietly for a moment, looking at the sculpture that seemed to embody transformation. Are you happy, Tanashi? Yes, I really am. Are you becoming someone you're proud of? I'm trying to be. That's all any of us can do. As Siwoo left the gallery that night, he realized their story had ended not with dramatic reconciliation or bitter recrimination, but with something rarer: mutual growth. Tanashi had bloomed into the extraordinary person she'd always been, and he was slowly learning to become someone capable of recognizing extraordinary when he saw it. The last text message between them came a month later, when Siwoo saw an article about Umoja Noir's expansion into the Middle East and African markets. Congratulations on the expansion. You're changing the world. Her response came hours later. Thank you. We all are, in our own ways. And that was how their story truly ended, not with love or hatred, but with the recognition that sometimes the kindest thing two people can do is free each other to become who they were always meant to be.